And to finish up this UN report, they want to finish up this UN report. There needs to be a much greater effort to protect civilians, is what they're saying, the UN conclusion they came to. Displaced people are human rights defenders. Displaced people and human rights defenders, aid workers, and journalists are among those most exposed to the fighting and the killing between the Islamic group and the government. And in some cases are being directly targeted, she added. UN investigators who spoke with refugees and internally displaced persons that fled the recent surge in fighting were told that the Al-Shabaab groups have carried out extrajudicial executions. In other words, no judge, no jury. The group is just executing people. They're planting mines, bombs, and other explosive devices in civilian areas and using civilians as human shields, according to a news release from the High Commissioner's office. In addition, fighters from both sides are reported to have used torture and fired mortars indiscriminately into areas populated or frequented by civilians. There has also been increasing evidence of child recruitment by various forces. Recruiting children to fight. Some of these acts might amount to war crimes. She added that the work of human rights defenders and journalists in Mogadishu has become extremely precarious, dangerous, with 6 journalists having been killed in Mogadishu. 6 journalists. 4 of them apparently victims of target assassinations since the beginning of the year. It is vital that the fighting and violence stop as soon as possible, the High Commissioner said, adding that once order has been restored, those responsible for human rights violations and abuses should be brought to justice. The gathering of evidence by all who are in a position to do so has to continue. So now, notice in this report, she's saying that, yeah, they should be brought to, these violators of human rights, they should be brought to justice after the fighting stops. They ain't saying nothing about trying to go in there and stop the fighting. But that's the UN, you know. They're gonna if they do anything, it's mostly just gonna be to give a report. Seems like, because it doesn't say anything in here about trying to intervene militarily to stop the fighting, to save innocent lives. Again, I'll read. It is vital, they say, it is vital that the fighting and violence stop as soon as possible. This is the High Commissioner saying that. And adding that once order has been restored, those responsible for human rights violations and abuses should be brought to justice. Well, that goes without saying. It is vital that and then it goes on to say, the gathering of evidence by all who are in a position to do so has to continue so that those committing these terrible crimes in Somalia will one day receive their due punishment. One day. Before a court of law, and their victims will finally see justice being done, she stated. Finally. Well, when that may be, what, 10, 20, 50 years from now? Meanwhile, in response to the displacement crisis facing many civilians from Mogadishu, the UN Children's Fund, UNICEF, and its partners are working to address the needs of those uprooted from their homes. They are distributing emergency supplies, including plastic sheets, blankets, jerry cans, soap, and mosquito nets for over 6,000 households, about 47,000 people, in and around Mogadishu. The majority of the displaced persons have moved to some Afgoye corridor, Afgoye corridor, a stretch of very densely populated displacement settlements, which is already hosting about 400,000 people. This is, I mean, I don't have words to describe. It's a tragedy, yeah. 400,000 people living in displacement settlements in Africa. Why? Why? The question is, why isn't anybody, the UN, the US, or anybody else, trying to go in here and militarily intervene and stop these people from this apparent ethnic cleansing, genocide, or whatever you want to call it, that's going on over there? And the responsibility of it is largely because of these militant Islamic groups, which the main one is talking about right here is a group called Al-Shabaab. Let's look at who Al-Shabaab is, a little bit more about Al-Shabaab. The World News report gives this report July 2010. Al-Shabaab, a militant Islamic group from Somalia, claimed its first act of terrorism on foreign soil Sunday, killing scores of people in a spate of bombings across the Ugandan capital, Kampala. But who is this group, and does it have influence in the U.S.? Somalia is widely seen as a failed state. It has had no real government for decades. The current administration under President Sharif Ahmed controls little of the country. Even its grasp on the capital, Mogadishu, is tenuous. In other words, the government of Somalia is not in control of that country. The terrorist group, Al-Shabaab, the terrorist Islamic group, Al-Shabaab, seems to be in control and terrorizing the country freely as they will. The government, who is doesn't even really have control of the capital, Mogadishu. The bloody civil war, he said it was a bloody civil war. He says that he watched a power bloc begin to rise from Somalia's Sharia court system in the mid-1990s. Sharia is a form of Islamic religious law that Islamic countries use as their law for the government. That's how the government is run in an Islamic country. It's by Sharia law, which comes from their religious beliefs. And we'll learn more about that later, but I'll get into that some more later. But this report continues to say, dictator Mohammed Siad Barre felled a group called the Islamic Courts Union. The Islamic Courts Union rose to power. In the wake of the American mission that led to the infamous Black Hawk Down incident, the ICU group took control. The ICU group gained control of much of the country. The ICU is the Islamic Courts Union. That's the group. The Islamic Courts Union was initially popular with Somalis citizens. They were fed up with corrupt and murderous warlords. This is history of Somalia that I'm reading, so you can know more about who Al-Shabaab, how Al-Shabaab came into existence. So the ICU was initially pretty popular because the people wanted law and order in a country that had become lawless. But the Sharia-driven alliance became more the Sharia-driven alliance, which is the Islamic Courts Union, that group. They became more militant, fundamentalist, and intolerant. It gradually lost territory under military pressure from a Western-backed transitional federal government and the Ethiopian army, and eventually fractured. One of the factions that emerged from it was called Al-Shabaab, which means the youth.